Well, last time I checked, my name was Gary England, and it still is, just like the country, E-N-G-L-A-N-D. And you know, I've been around in the television media business and radio also for 40-some years, 42 years now, in that vicinity. Been in weather my entire life. But the big deal was to get on television and become a television meteorologist. And you know, when Harry Volkman early on, I come from the time frame where as a kid, in that time frame, I remember Harry Volkman. Obviously, Harry's the person that motivated me to get involved in television. I didn't even, well, to give an example, we lived in the country, didn't have a TV set, and we'd go to town every Sunday at Grandma's house, watch Harry do a 15-minute weather show. And I was really excited. I liked the weather anyway. And Harry had a 15-minute weather show on Sundays. He was looking over at Channel 4 at that time. And golly, I just fell in love with it. And one time I'm at Grandma's house and Daddy's right there, and I pointed at the TV set and I pointed at Harry. I said, "Daddy, I want to be one of those." My daddy said, "Well, what is he?" And I said, "I don't know, but I want to be one." So ever since I was in the 7th grade, I wanted to be a television meteorologist. It took a long time to get there. Now, once you're there, people think you've been there forever. So Harry's the one that motivated me. You know, there was Wally Canaan, the weatherman. There was Don Peoples. And there's early on guys, and there are a few other ones that were it was just amazing. Of course, Lola Hall was always there. And it seemed like for a long time, it was a beautiful lady and a wonderful lady. But anyway, Harry got me interested in weather. I went into service, I got out of the service, went to college, graduated from OU, couldn't find a job. When I graduated, I went to Amarillo and Austin and all the towns around to audition for jobs, television jobs. Nobody would hire me. I still have all the rejection letters. See, in those days, they sent you a letter. They were very cordial and nice. Say, "Hey, we don't want you," but they're very nice. They say, "We'll keep your record, your letter on file," which means they ain't gonna call you, baby. But at least I got out of college and had a degree in mathematics and meteorology, and nobody would hire me. I'd been in the service, so I was a little, for a while I had a short haircut and I was pretty rigid, but still nobody would hire me. Well, got out of college, came to Oklahoma City. Like I said, couldn't find a job, so a couple other guys and I put in a business forecasting for the offshore, we were forecasting for aviation, agriculture, and industry. And when we were planning this business, there were 3 of us, we went into whatever this aviation place was out at Wiley Post, said, "What do you think of this? What do you think about having a private forecast service? So, you could call and talk to us, blah, blah, blah. How's that sound to you?" And they say, "That sounds really good." So, we put the business in, and really we'd asked the wrong questions. So we went back and said, "Okay, we're ready to sign you up." And they said, for example, it's kind of paraphrasing, obviously, but they'd say, "We said we liked it. We didn't say we'd buy it." So we kind of struggled for a couple of years there. One of my partners got a chance. In fact, he and I both went out to Channel 4, and this is about 1966, somewhere in the vicinity, 67. And we both auditioned for the morning job, and my partner got it. Jerry Osborne. Jerry's a great guy, and he was a commander or something like that in the Navy also. But anyway, he got the job and got it. It was what I wanted to do all my life, and I didn't get it. And I'm kind of telling you the long version of how I got to News 9. So I gave up. My wife told me, "Hey, we're going to have a baby." And so I had to get a real job, and I wrote out applications to several private weather services around the country, and only one answered, just one. He was A.H. Glenn from A.H. Glenn and Associates, consultants in meteorology, oceanography, and civil engineering. New Orleans, and I dreamed a lot about being on television. I saw it. When I was at school at OU, and it was in the 60s. I drew those maps on the wall. I practiced. Well, couldn't find that job, so I'm down there in New Orleans. We take the job. We go down there. It's not anything close to television, but it was. I always call it my real life PhD, because the guy I worked for, A.H. Glenn, brilliant guy, mean, but still brilliant. And he finally taught me discipline. He taught me so much about meteorology and oceanography and civil engineering. And he was the world's expert in those 3 combined fields, and I had no idea. So learned a lot from him. But I went to a station down there, I think it was WVUE Television, I believe it was in New Orleans, and I went down and talked to the news director. I just saw his letter the other day, because I read all these occasionally to remind me how lucky I am. I went down to see him, and he basically told me, he said he saw, this is the news director in New Orleans, he said he saw no reason for a weatherman on television. And he also said, now or ever. Now that'll take frosting off the cake. We're down there 4 years, paid off most of the bills I've made in Oklahoma, and I came back to Oklahoma City, still had that dream. I wanted to be up here where the tornadoes were and the storms really were. Even though I dealt with hurricanes and every kind of weather you can imagine while I was in New Orleans, we did forecasting work around the world, biological studies and such. But I got back up here. My wife got a job at KTOK. Once again, I couldn't get a job. And in those days, they used typewriters. For you young people, that means those things you used to be able to have these little keys you click, kind of like a computer, but different. You had to physically do this stuff. But I tried to get a job selling typewriters and they wouldn't hire me. I tried to get some of those jobs selling those encyclopedias door to door and they wouldn't hire me. But I think they figured out as soon as a weather job came open, I'd be gone. My wife's at KTOK, so I'd go down there and visit, and it was Mr. Shooter was his name. He was a general manager. And Mr. Jones, I believe, was a sales manager. A lot of great people that went on to television. Doug Fox and so many of them. Doug went through Channel 9 and ended up down in Dallas. I think he's in Colorado at this particular point in time. But it was a fascinating time. I'm starving to death, and they were putting in a radar. They decided to put in a radar, and I drove down there one morning. I was down at 7 o'clock every morning, drinking their coffee. We didn't have any coffee at home. You hear people talk about being poor. We're poor. There's no exaggeration. And I'm down there, and a storm came up, and the engineer was going to run the radar. Really couldn't. He could run the radar, but he couldn't translate from radar into storms and all that. So they hired me on the spot down at KTOK. And you can imagine I've been hanging around for a while. I go pretty cheaply. They told me I don't know how much an hour it was, but they gave me an office because KTOK radio used to be in an old house. And so my office was like you go out in the garage, you pull that stairs down, you go up those stairs. And gotta tell you, it was amazing. They gave me the radar was about that long, little tiny tube, but boy, hey, it was a radar. It was an RCA AVQ-10 5-degree beam width. You couldn't tell whether you had a hurricane or a bumblebee on there. But anyway, had a little light bulb hanging down. I'm out there in the top of the attic and had a telephone and a microphone and some earphones. And I'm up there and doing some crazy stuff with Bob Riggins, who was on the radio. He helped me create some things, and we came up with the 805-pound thunder lizard, and all this relates to television eventually. And we created this fictitious character, but I'd say, hey, just received a telephone call that someone saw an 805-pound thunder lizard running across Interstate 40 at mile marker, whatever it was. And in those days, you had to pull off. Someone would pull off the gas station, they'd call in to KTOK, say they just saw it also. And a lot of people saw it too. But, we did all these crazy things with it. And then I remember on one July day, the skies were clear, 100 degrees easy, 5 p.m. rush, not a cloud in the sky, so no threat of a tornado. I ran the tornado beeps, beep, 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 and everybody was familiar with beep, 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 and said, this would be a tornado warning. And I just laughed and said I was kidding. Of course, nowadays you go to jail for things like that. But what happens, I did those crazy things, and people went to work and said, yeah, they're listening to this guy on KTOK radio. He's crazy. And I did lots of wild stuff. Well, I worked there a year, and they fired me three times during that year because in the spring it was over, they didn't need me, and then I got all the statistics together on boating in the summer, and they'd hire me back anyway. But thank God they gave me a job. And one day the phone rings up there, and I was in the attic, and it was Jack DeLear. And he said, listen, I've heard you on the radio. You sound a little crazy, but I'd like to talk to you. And I went out there, met Jack DeLear. Jack was a bomber pilot in World War II, and great experiences there. Great guy, just loved him immediately. And he said, we'd like for you to do an audition. I said, okay. I began to kind of choke up a little bit. Well, I want to do this all my life, but I know I've started jerking around a little bit. But I said, I'll do the audition, and I didn't have a jacket or a suit or anything, so we went to Hobart, where my wife is from, and I bought me a pair of powder blue pants for this audition, a maroon jacket, and a multicolored shirt and tie. Baby, I was styling. Hair was long down into here. Lots of hair. Did that tape and they offered me the job. And you know, they said, we'll give you $1,000 a month. Lordy, that was so much more we'd ever made in our entire lives. And so took the job. Went out there, and you know, I always, and this is not necessarily a good trait, I always kind of like to take over whatever I'm involved in. So I get in there, and I met the guy I'd talked to previously with Jack Glenn, the news director. Well, that'd only been like 2 weeks, and he was already gone. You know, they fired him just like that out there. And I've been out there before I left there 40 years, 41 years, what it was. And I had like 35, 40 news directors, to give you some idea. So I go back out, I've been hired, and I got a new news director already, and that was Rick Townley, and Rick was about the size of a bowling pin, and he was a real, well, he's still a hippie. And he and I had some real bad arguments, and because he wanted to control me, and it was a person I thought I knew what we needed to do, and he and I had these and he would just jump all over me. So I'd write well, not an email, but I would write a memo. In those days, you had a piece of paper and you type it or write it. I'd write these memos threatening to quit, and I'd slide that under Jack Delaire's office door. And I come to work the next day, and Jack said, Gary, you have to quit sending me those midnight memos. You're going to give me a heart attack. And so he said, just keep me advised. And he had talked to the news director settled down. And then as soon as Jack walked out of the door, out of the room, news director just makes some statement, you know, I didn't think was right. And so I'd tell on him, and Jack had dragged the news director back down there, making him apologize. I mean, this went on, and all of a sudden he was gone. And I saw him later, Rick Townley, saw him in Indianapolis, I believe. And he was at the station there, and I said, what happened? You left kind of suddenly. And he said, I wouldn't mind if a banker would have caused me to be fired, but he said it was a used car dealer. They ran an undercover study on used car dealers and advertisers. It's not a good idea to pick on the advertisers, you know. And so he left. But I'm out there, and Lola's there, and Lola looks at me like, you little twerp. And I was kind of bossy. You know, they made me the chief. I was the chief. Supposed to be the chief hog. Of course, it was just me and Lola. And remember one time she called me a high roller because I changed the schedules around. But there were only two of us. Really, she was handling all of it because David Grant had just left, of course, right before I got there. And it's she and I did the morning shows for a little while. And I remember that first show, after a week of training, I decided I would just go ahead and do the morning show. And we got all lined up, and there's this guy, he was a hippie, long ponytail, he was behind that camera. And I'm standing out there, I'm scared to death, I have to tell you. I was terrified, even though I wanted to do this all my life. And he steps out, around at the camera, and he goes, stand by. I remember thinking, I don't really want to do this like that. And that camera came on, and it seemed like forever I couldn't say anything. I know my mouth came open several times, and I like to never got through the show, and I ended up laughing through the show. And so I started that early morning show, did that for a couple of weeks, and then assigned myself to the evening show, which has really upset the current news director, whoever that was at that particular time. But Sam Stewart was the news guy back then. Anybody remember that name, Sam Stewart? And it was, I can't remember the other fellow's name, but there was two of them did the news. And Sam, I know he's probably holding an IFB in his ear. It looked like he was always pulling on his ear. And there were people on national television doing the same thing. But there was Sam Stewart was there, and Bob Jenny. I hadn't been there very long, and you know, Bob's the outdoor guy. He always had a bag of snakes, rattlesnakes by the back door inside, scare the daylights out of you when you come in. I hadn't been there very long, and I'm doing my show. In those days, we had two big drums. You know, four sides to each one, and I'd stand there and you push it, roll it, and you do that. Well, I didn't even see him or hear him. He came up behind me. I'm on the air live on the 6 o'clock news, and he has a llama with him. And he ties that llama to my other weatherboard right behind me. And so, when I turned around and saw the llama, I saw that Ralph Combs was the anchor then. Jerry Adams was coming in also as an anchor. But they were laughing, and so I finished, and I turned around this llama. I'm face to face with this llama. You know, I'm brand new in television, and the llama goes to the bathroom, number 2. And we laughed till we cried. We almost got fired over it. But it was what came then was called, we created Happy Talk Television. Because Ralph Combs, tall, good-looking guy, great anchor. he picked on me incessantly because I was short. I'm still short. But he'd pick on me, and the audience would identify with me, and we'd fight back and forth, and it was really funny times. When Jerry Adams came in at the same time. Well, here's Ralph, and here's Jerry, and I'm over here, and Pam Olsen somewhere over there, and John Snyder, the sportsman, great guy. He's on there too. But Jerry Adams and Ralph didn't get along too well, and at some point there, our news director, another one, left. And they appointed Ralph not only the anchor, but he's also the news director. So I think he saw this as a chance to nail Jerry Adams. So I remember at one point, between the 5 and the 6 o'clock, I believe it was, between two shows, they go outside to fight. Just picture that happening nowadays. And, and those were the days. I went to work there August 16th, 1972. Exciting time. For me, it was exciting because I finally had a job and my wife really didn't have to work anymore. Not that I was making that much money, but it was exciting times. And it was a time that I'm sure it went on every business. There's drugs. There were drugs everywhere. I'm from Sealing, Oklahoma. I wasn't quite used to that. Even though I was in school in the 60s, we were married, so we weren't exposed to much of that. But at Channel 9, I remember probably most of them. The best example I can give you, I come back from lunch, getting ready for the 10 o'clock show. I come back in about 9 o'clock, and there's this big dude up there in the control room A. Tom Crow's up there. Jerry Dowram, Jerry Danforth wasn't up there. There's so many. I wish I could remember all their names. But this guy's got like a big shirt box. Shirts come in. And there's people gathered all around. I said, hey, what you got? He held that out to me. He said, anything you want. So it was in those days, if you watched television, you saw a lot more of the wall and the floor than you did the people on the air, because the camera guys were pretty gassed up at times. Between shows, they'd go out and get their pickup, smoke marijuana. First time I saw it, I thought there was a pickup on fire out behind. I mean, it was just crazy times. And I wish I'd made more notes. I got a lot of notes, but get part of a book written too. But it was a time when it was, the Vietnam War was still going on. The Vietnam War was beginning to end, and you had people that were, they were the hippies. You had the people that were pro-war, the people that were against the war. I mean, and we were a microcosm of society at that time, and there was a lot of turbulence and a lot of turmoil, and a lot of crazy things going on. I received a letter. And Sam Stewart was out there. He's one of the anchors, and I got this letter, and no emails, obviously, in those days. And it was from a girl, and she told me what she looked like. She was just blonde, certain height, certain shape, and all this. And she said, I'd sure like to meet you, and she made some suggestions. So I showed that letter to everybody in the station, and I went to eat. And I came back, and I walked in the studio, and you ever just sense when something is there, something's going on. And I looked across the studio, because this girl had told me she was blonde-headed, and I looked over, and we didn't have blondes right then. I saw a blonde, and she's sitting there with her back to me, 20, 30, 40 yards away, whatever. And Sam Stewart yelled, hey, Gary, somebody over here wants to meet you. And I'm thinking, oh my God. And I walk over there, and this gal is sitting with her back to me, and I get right up close to her, and she jumped up and spun around and ran toward me. And they'd blacked out several of her teeth. And, I fell over a chair. I mean, they'd set me up the entire way. It was just beautiful. Another time, Tom Crow worked out there many, many years. I have to tell you about Tom Crow. Tom is a guy's guy, muscle, tough, motorcycle, all that stuff. Well, for the first few weeks, he put the makeup on me. I thought, this is really weird. Here's this big, manly guy putting the makeup on, but that's part of his job. But one night I'm out there at those weatherboards, and they were magnetic, and you had to draw on with some chalk and such, and magnetic numbers, and I'm putting my stuff together, pardon me, and I hear the door open to the studio, and I hear high heels come across there. And I didn't even turn around until they stopped, and I turned around, face to face with a very attractive, very beautiful girl, long blonde hair, high heels, full-length mink. And I'm Sealing, Oklahoma. I've been naive all my life. I went, she said, Gary, I don't believe we've met. And she jerks her coat open, and she's stark naked. And I never saw a thing because I was looking over her shoulder, going, I was stuttering and I looked past her into the control room, and there was Crowell and all those guys up there laughing. She was a model, and they'd paid her to do that. It was beautiful. It was just flat beautiful. So great times, back then. Of course, it was Ralph Combs, and I mentioned John Snyder, for a while. Ted Leichner, who ended up in California, was there. Ted was went to Southern California. San Diego was the big hog in sports for many years, 30 years, 40 years. I don't know what it is or was, but really, really popular. And we've had a lot of people move through, and most of them I don't remember the names. There's been too many of them through the years. But I look back at the crazy things. I remember Jack Lear said, "Gary, you need to do some things that, promotions that the audience will identify with." And I said, okay. So I got a call from, I think it was Hinton, Oklahoma. They said, "We'd like for you to be in a rodeo parade." And I said, "Well, what do you want me to do in that parade?" And they said, "Well, listen, we'll get you on a horse, and all you have to do is ride alongside the queen of the rodeo." And it's a very short main street. I think it's the shortest main street in the world, but which is good. And I said, "Okay, listen, here's the deal. I've been thrown off of a horse, and I have been bitten by a horse, so get me a good horse." And if you remember, there was a movie years ago, Cat Ballou, where the horse is inebriated. And well, I arrive, I see this horse there in the corral, and it's leaning against the barn, big old sway back. I thought, that's the horse for me. And we get that horse saddled, and I ride it downtown. It just kind of plops along a little bit. I'm feeling pretty good about this. I want to be the parade marshal. I'm in this parade with the queen of the rodeo, and we all line up, and the band is there, and it starts. And make a long story short, everything moves. All the horses move except my horse. The little girl, it's the queen of the rodeo. She's on my right. Her horse takes her down there, a few yards, and my horse will not move. And then all of a sudden, after she's down their ways, my horse charges straight down the road, runs into the left side of her horse, slammed her horse and her into the back of this car. And I'm going, holy cow. And then we get all organized. Make a long story short, it happened again. And thankfully, it was a short main street. I got back to that corral, and I asked that old boy, I said, what is wrong with that horse? And he said, well, what did it do? And I told him, and he said, oh, there's nothing wrong with that horse. He said, that's a rodeo pickup horse. And that's the horse in the rodeo when there's guy riding a bronc. This horse carries a guy out there, and they take the rider off the bronc. It's called a pickup horse. So that's what he was. So I learned a good lesson, but I always got involved in those things. They called me up from Purcell. I always did radio. All the time I did television, but I always did radio too. And they called me up from a radio station down in Norman, somewhere in there, and said, listen, the Purcell Rodeo's coming up, and we'd like for you to be in that rodeo. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? And they said, well, we'd like for you to ride a bull. I said, no, I don't want to ride a bull. I learned a little bit. And this is where I made my mistake. This guy said, wait a minute, it's a trained bull. This is where I made my mistake. I said, well, how's that work? He said, well, you get the bull in the chute, and you open the gate and it walks out. And you blow a whistle and it'll buck, and you blow a whistle and it'll stop bucking. So I said, you got a deal. I have the whistle in my mouth. And so for 3 months, I talked myself into a corner on radio and television. I'm going to do this and do that, because I had a trained bull, I thought. And about a week before the rodeo, I received a small book in the mail, and it was on bull riding. I remember thinking, why would I need a book on bull riding? And I fanned through that, and the line I remember was violent random motion. So I get down to Purcell, night of the rodeo. They had the first sellout in the history of the rodeo. And I got blue patent leather boots from Napoleon Nash, so they weren't cowboy boots. I had bell-bottom Levi's, a red, white, and blue shirt, big white hat. And I went down a little earlier to look at my bull, before I was going to have to get on him. And that bull took one look at me, and he knew that I was a newbie. And that bull got to thrashing around the little slobbers, and God, I was terrified. So we went back up this guy's house. It had been a central point inviting me, and drank about 6 beers. And then we went to the rodeo. Came my time to ride, and the same thing happened. We get down there by that, and that bull just went nutso when he saw me. And so you get on a bull, and a bull's back is just solid muscle. And every time I'd try to sit down, he'd try to hook my left leg with his left horn. And I noted at that time he had a matching horn on the right. And he tried to do that every time I'd sit down. And Ray B, we called him Ray B. Bieska, went on to be a long-time video guy, camera guy with CBS. Ray B had been wounded 3 times in Vietnam. And this bull's thrashing around, about to throw me off in the chute. And Ray B looks at me. There he is, a combat veteran. He says, "Don't do it, Gary, don't do it." I said, "Thanks a lot, Ray B." And I still thank Ray B for that. But anyway, finally they tie, and I didn't realize, even though I've been raised on a farm, they kind of tie your hand down. And my hand's tied down, and I'm pointing, and I asked, there was a guy right in front of me, he had tobacco right here, 2 or 3 teeth were gone. I figured bull, by this point, I'd knocked him out. He was a real cowboy. And I finally said to him, "Where do I look?" And he held his hand up right in front of my eyes. I said, "Look right at my hand." I said, "No, when I get out there." And he looked at me and he smiled. He said, "You ain't gonna have to worry about that." And I didn't, because you know, seen those old cowboys when they get on that bull, they shake their head. That's automatic. Your head starts shaking. Open the gate. Good Lord Almighty, we went up in the air. When I came down, I landed on my head, rolled over, climbed the fence, found my wife, went home. Monday morning, Jack DeLear, the man that hired me, Channel 9, said, "Don't you ever do anything like that." I said, "Well, one more story like this. The circus came to town. They called me up and said, 'Would you ride in a parade? Would you ride an elephant?' And I'm thinking, hey, I did a bull. I can do an elephant." Well, this was in the day of the double knit pants. I believe down there, Ralph Combs was on an elephant down there. Jerry Adams was, a bunch of the people in the media from the other stations. And but I was in my double knit pants. They were all in Levi's. But I was styling, baby. In double knit pants, though, you don't know, anything will go through them. I mean, they're just loosely woven. And the problem I had, and they threw me up there on that elephant where you ride, the elephant hair is about that long. I'd say I rode about 2 miles that day with elephant hair in my underwear. So I learned a little bit. I've been naive all my life, though. Did lots of parades, lots of speeches, and as time rolls along, Jerry Dalrymple is a guy that worked at it. And Jerry came from Louisiana, and I think he'd been at like a cable puller for the cameras down in some place in Louisiana, maybe Shreveport. And they hired him in Channel 9 to do the same thing. That's the guy who worked all the way up to executive vice president. He looked like a gorilla. He was a real Cajun, man. He was mean and he was tough. And marketing-wise and promotion-wise for television, he was as brilliant as they come. He could have done the largest circus in the world. But Jerry Jerry could see I was getting a little bit popular, and I needed some help. Somebody had some weight, so he and I kind of joined up, and we did I went a lot of places. Gave literally over the years, hundreds, well actually thousands of speeches when you count appearances in all those classrooms and all that. But somebody called us from Stillwater, Oklahoma, and said, "Listen, would you come up here to Stillwater and do a weather show or tornado show for us, something like that?" And they said, "Well, what do you want?" And they said, "Well, we want tornadoes and that kind of stuff and safety." So I tell Jerry, oh God, there he goes. He lines up. I don't know how many. The place holds 750, 800 people. It's a church, as I recall, and he lined up had them wire up all these TV sets. The wires are running everywhere, and we had a projector, and I got up on this stage, and it's supposed to start at 7, and I got to tell you, at 6:30, there is nobody there. We'd promoted it at 6:45, there was nobody there. And I said, "Jerry, I don't think anybody is coming to this thing." He said, "Never fear, they'll be here." And about 5 to 7, they came rolling in, and it filled the place up. We did this show. Patty Suarez was there. Roger Cooper was there. And Patty was absolutely stunning, beautiful woman. We did this show. 750 people showed up. So we tried it again the next year. We went back to Stillwater, held at the same place, same thing. Filled it up. Overflowed crowd. Dwayne Harm came along as general manager. Bright guy. Really bright guy. He knew sales. He knew television. All those things. And totally different than Jack DeLear had been, the guy that hired me. But Dwayne's in there, and Dwayne looked at the results of these terrible twists. It was called a traveling weather show initially, and we'd tell him about, and we went to Enid, and we had like 1,500 people there. And he called us in and said, "Listen, what do you need? What size cameras? Do you need a sound system?" He gave us everything we needed. And we bought this huge screen, I don't know what it was, to put these shows on. And we switched away from, the film into the video. and the whole thing was always sort of a work in progress. But we had one at the Myriad where 7,000 people came to the Myriad, and we did one out in Norman at the basketball building there, and we had 4,000 people. We did these things for 20 years, but it was Jerry. I can remember he'd crawl around on the floor. We were at Shawnee at the Baptist University there, and it was all wired up. This is when we were still using television sets for people to look at, and he'd crawl along on the floor and listen to how it sounded, where did it sound good back there, and he really busted his tail. He's the one that really made that a success. But he and I made a pretty good team. But after that one in Shawnee, they were loud and they were noisy, and we had a lot of fun with them. But this lady came up and she said, "Mr. England, my mama is from Russia, and she was in World War II. She said this tonight was as loud as World War II." We held another one at a small church out on the I-35, about 500 people. And the lady called me the next day because Jerry believed you'd run up that volume, and he knew what he was to run up that volume, and your eardrums vibrated. And the lady called me the next day. And she said, "Mr. England, my daddy is 90-some years old, and I took him to your Terrible Twister show last night." And she said, "He's really hard of hearing, and this morning he can't hear anything." That confirmed what I've been telling Jerry. I said, "Yeah, you're killing me. I can't hear either." But anyway, that was the mainstay. It was the backbone of what we did. And news was involved in it, and of course weather was involved, top management was involved, and people came to that thing. People come up, in recent times say, "I came to your show as a 6-year-old." So that thing worked. But so all through that time back there, I was going to the school, because I started out going to one school, one classroom. Then I'd do an entire school, and then I'd do a club. And some days I'd do a morning breakfast club, I'd do a noon luncheon, I'd do a school in the afternoon, and I'd do some kind of PTA in the evening. I did thousands of those, and that helped build the audience. But the funny people. Well, I told you about Ralph Combs, and he was very distinguished. He got in a fight with the owner of Channel 9 over a nuclear power plant in eastern Oklahoma, or proposed one. And I remember at the time thinking, that's probably not a good idea to get in an argument with the guy that owns the station. But Ralph had kind of a hot temper, and anyway, he went away, and gosh, he sued the company, and I had to testify. As I recall, I got up there and said, I thought, because actually the news director told somebody they fired Ralph because he was too old. Ralph was 45. So he sued and won. But I had to testify, did I think he was old? And so I'm up there, and it was a federal case. I said, "Yeah, they're older than me, and he does a good job." So, but anyway, it's a credit to John Griffin, the owner of the station at that time, that there I was really testifying against him, and he never said a word. But crazy stuff that's happened. I told you about Bob Jenny early on in the rattlesnakes. One day the rattlesnakes got loose on the set. We did the show with the cameramen. Those are big old cameras up on the sides of the cameras. It was just such a crazy time early on in the 70s and into the 80s. And I was so focused on the weather. If I were on vacation and there was a threat of a storm at all, I'd come home. If I was in California, I'd get on a plane. I'd come home to be here for that one day, and sometimes nothing would happen. So I was totally committed to weather and safety and all of that. And so it kind of really shut down a lot of my other parts of my life. But since I'd always wanted to do this since I was a kid, it was great. Well, Patty Suarez came along. She became an anchor. And the first time I saw her, we used to have a big get-together before the season would start. This was at a theater on May Avenue, and all the advertising agencies, all the people would come, and they introduced Patty Suarez. And she came out there with Craig Mars. Craig ended up, I believe, still is running a television station in Arizona, at least as of this particular date. But Craig was the news director, and Craig brought her out, and I told him always naive. I thought that was his date. And I said to somebody, how did he get somebody like that for a date? I mean, she's absolutely stunning, and she could sing. She could Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. I mean, but anyway, she was beautiful. She was gorgeous, and she would float a little bit on the air like all of us. But you didn't care if she messed up. She was just so pretty. and she always just dressed so cute, and we had such great times out there. You know, Ralph was gone. You know, we bought a set. They bought a set, a limited time frame, a broadcast set from a television station in Atlanta, Georgia. I think they paid $90,000 for it. It was huge, and it just made all of us look really little. Roger Cooper and Patty and I, and Roger had no sense of humor. Roger had to teach himself to smile, and we'd go out on a shoot. He'd go, and that's what he would do. He'd make that noise. So on the air, he didn't have a lot of humor and not a lot of personality, but they brought Patty in, and she was so bubbly and so pretty and just all these things. It was just great. Somewhere in that time frame, Bill Tiggins came along, and Bill and I became great friends. Bill and I used to, during the Redbud, it's a run, you know, they raise money for charity, Redbud run. And they signed Bill and I to do the, I think it was an hour special on Sunday afternoon, Sunday or Saturday afternoon. And everybody shot the video, and we helped kind of put it together. But, you know, Bill and I occasionally would have a brew or two. And sometimes we did those shows over the years. We had more than one brew, you know, good course, and you know, you can't do this nowadays, but we'd do that show, and we were about half lit up, and they were some of the best shows they ever had, because we were loose, having a good time, and Bill was always funny, you know, and of course he was killed in that airplane crash, and he told me one time, he said, before that obviously, he said, Gary, he said, what I fear most is dying in a small aircraft. It's really strange that actually happened, but a pig came along in my life. And this lady called him and said, but Gary, would you like to have a pig? I said, yeah, I'd like pigs. Used to raise pigs. And so she brought these little pigs out. She said, it's a pot belly. It'll never get any bigger than this. Well, it got a little bigger than that. It got up to 165, 175 pounds. But she gave me this little pig, and it became famous. It received more invitations for public appearances than all the anchors put together. Because if the kids would read and the school would read 10,000 books, the principal would have to kiss the pig. And the pig was trained. But you get down, and the kids always read the book because they wanted to see the principal kiss the pig. So whoever it was, let's say the principal would get down on her hands and knees, and she would have, for example, a little piece of popcorn, just on the edge of her lips, as she bent down to kiss that pig, and that pig would just grab that piece of popcorn. Well, if you paused, you got the big tongue. And that pig, that old slimy tongue, come out and slap him in the face. It was a great success, but the pig was popular. Had its own song, Take a Hike with Spike. You know, it had its own driver. It had a pickup for it. Lou Ann Stewart was a graduate, I think, University of Oklahoma, one of the universities around here. And she was a marketing director, but she drove the pig every place we needed him. And I took him most places I went. And he wore a baseball hat, and he rode over here. And you know, she finally said, you know, I didn't go to college 4 years to drive a damn pig around Oklahoma City. But the pig was popular. We're out at the state fair, and got this fairly large area, and there's a picket fence all around, white picket fence. Boy, it looked good. Tiggins there, and Patty's there, and I guess it's Roger, the four of us, and the pig's right there. And, you know, there must have been 200 people right here in this section. And they're just, you know how if you're on television or media, you think, well, they're here to see us. Well, this is really great. And at some point, the pig walks off, goes down the fence. The entire crowd went with him and left the four of us standing there. And Tiggins looked at me and said, you know, I've been stood up before, but never by a pig. He was a classic and stuff like that. Weather guys, you know, early on, we had Tom Mahoney. Tom wore the scariest suits you've ever seen in your life. Not Jim, but Dennis Smith, who went on to the Weather Channel. He worked for me there. And they went to the Weather Channel. Tom went up to Michigan. Tom retired sometime in the, maybe from this date, about 3 or 5 years ago. But he hung in there. We had a guy from, I don't remember exactly where he's from, but he came in. We had an opening, and he was ex-Air Force. Get the job done, you know, always look good, smell good, long silver hair, look good. And Alan is his name. And the storm, 1986, jump around a little bit on you. But in 1986, storm developed southwest of Oklahoma City. Reports wall cloud, low-range funnels, hail, boom, boom, boom. So I said, Alan, why don't you go out behind and look? Alan looked at me and said, yes, sir. He went out the door. A few minutes later, Alan came back in. That perfect, beautiful silver hair was all blown off the side. His tie was wrapped around his back there, and he's pointing at the sky going, you, and he finally says, you better come and look at this. We didn't have a lot of outdoor cameras in those days. So we ran out the back door, and I got to tell you, the entire sky was rotating. And he had already frightened me. Alan just scared the daylights. I mean, I walk out and I see this, and I had to go back in and do an update. You know, they used to go like tornado warning continues for Oklahoma County. All residents should continue with tornado precautions. Stay with News 9. We'll keep you advised. The only problem is my voice was up kind of high, and I just knew I was going to go in there and shout, "You're all going to die! You're going to die!" But I made it through it. Had a lot of crazy things. Like Alan Mitchell was a great employee. You know, we've had what we finally got into is bringing in interns from the University of Oklahoma, and a lot of times we hired those interns. So we've had a lot of great people through the years in meteorology, and we've always insisted on meteorology graduates from the University of Oklahoma, because we know if they can get through that program, they're pretty darn good. They're smart, they'll make good decisions. So the weather end of it was always fun, always great. And you know, we were always so serious, we didn't have time to pull too many jokes on each other, but there were some I think did happen. But when I look through the years, it's the things that just happen accidentally that is so darn funny. Most of them, or not most, but a lot of them I can't tell you. Now I have something in my hands here, probably from about 1973. It's got pictures on it. Oh, there was Lucius Selman, Gary Backus, Tim Welch, Ida B. Went to a lot of parties, Ida B. And Danny Williams. Always was around Danny. Y'all remember Dean Swanson from Channel 5? He's on it. There's Gary England. There's Ralph Combs. There's JoJo Jungles. We were at the boat show. We sang, at least the guys, we all sang in a kind of a barbershop quartet. But let me tell you one of the funnier things I recall happening. You know, I always stayed. If it's stormy, I stayed. If it was stormy, I stayed all night and drove, as I've been told, drove the other television station weather guys crazy. And I don't know the exact details on this, but as Fred Norman or one of them, Fred, said to Jim Williams, you know, wish England would go home so we could go home. Well, there's other parts to that. What I would do, because I knew they were doing that, because I knew as soon as it was obvious we'd gone back to programming or I was gone, they were gone. So for many years, late night, whenever, you know, after 10:30 show, maybe it's 11 o'clock at night, still some storms, I'd put somebody else on, and it looked like I'd gone home. And just almost instantly, they'd be gone, they wouldn't be on the air, and I give them some time there where I knew they had time to get home, and then I'd go back on. And where the other stations took it, if I was on, it was really bad. And so they'd call them, and they'd have to come back in. And I know I dealt them a lot of misery through the years in that particular area. The great stuff there. You know, make sure I haven't missed anybody here. I see who we have here. We got, you all remember in radio, John Brooks. Had a lot to do with him. And does anyone out there remember Captain Purdue and Red Rover, KTOK, in the days of KTOK radio was growing? This is one of my favorite things right here. It's got a picture of me in my hometown newspaper, Dewey County. And the headline is, England has accepted a job. So it's the only one I could get. But anyway, there's my letter from, I don't know whether I discussed this before. Yeah, I went down to New Orleans, talked to the news director down there, and about being on television, or television meteorologist. And I have his letter. I kept all these things. So when I go down to the various universities and talk to the kids who are going to be meteorologists, I take these rejection letters, because, you know, life has a lot of rejections. We ran a contest, got out Channel 9 on the Thunder Lizard. Thunder Lizard, you know, we created at KTOK early on, and it was imaginary, but people began to think it was real. I got out to Channel 9, got on television, and Jack Delir first said, I don't think we need to be talking about this lizard. But I kept doing it anyway, and got great audience response, but people wanted to see it. Radio, you could just work with their imaginations. They wanted to see this. So the first thing we did, we ran a contest. It said, draw or paint what you think the Thunder Lizard looks like. And we got a couple thousand applications. Some of them were even like from the fire department at Watonga. It was a vice grip, legs and horns, and I wrote them back and said, you guys need more fires. You got too much time on your hands. But people really, they were excited about this thing. But not everybody had heard about it. Just the radio people really had heard it. But a couple thousand people entered this thing. And right before that, just, I don't know, it might have been a month before that, I'm out there and I know I'm going to have to talk about the lizard. So I got a cameraman. It was a cold, windy day. I think it was in October. And he had a big sheepskin coat on. And he was a hippie. Long flowing hair, he had a cowboy hat on, and we're out behind the television station, and he got that camera, and he's on him. You know, the camera guy got it on him, and he looks, boy, he's framed just right. And I said, "Sir, I understand you saw something." Now we're filming this. He said, "I understand you saw something recently." He said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I was going home about 3 a.m. on Sunday morning." I should have given it away. And he said, something really big ran across the road. I said, "Well, sir," and he would kick the gravel. You know, he wouldn't look. He'd look around. He'd look at the camera. I said, "Well, how big do you think it was?" He said, "It looked to me it was about 805 pounds." I said, "Really?" And so he kind of kicked the gravel. I said, "What do you think it was?" And boy, he kicked the gravel, looked around, looked back at that camera, and just said, "Well, I think possibly it was an 805-pound thunder lizard." Well, we ran that on the air, the 6 p.m. news. In those days, you could jam the telephone lines. It jammed the telephone lines, that part of Oklahoma City. A lot of people had seen it too, but it was just so amazing. And then we took that. Then we did the contest with all of that, and really we never did tell them for sure it was imaginary. And I still to this day have people come up and say, "Now, was that thunder lizard real, or where is the thunder lizard? Were you talking about a motorcycle?" It was something that could take the audience's imagination and they could work it. And on radio, it was easier to do. We still did it on television, but we finally just let the 805-pound thunder lizard fade away. And I got a manager's letter from Jack Lear right here saying we were all doing a wonderful job. That was a long time ago. I look at this, it's kind of surprising. You know, a lot of publicity in those days. Newspapers were big, and you got a lot of publicity. And there's, of course, I got a picture here. There's Ralph Combs, there's Sam Stewart, Ted Lackner, and there's a picture of a red pig. Before I had Spike the Wonder Pig, I had a red pig, and that's when I lived on Orlando in the village. You know, you look at what's happened. You know, in those days, you know, it's typewriters. It's the weather comes in on a teletype, the same stuff I'd used when I was in the service. The weather maps came in on this big machine, and it kind of burned the picture in that you wanted. No satellite pictures early on. They send you kind of a rusty-looking thing they sent out. But I found out that there was a satellite up there, and I found the company in Germany in 1977. They said, "Yeah, we got some satellite receivers." They said it in broken English. They were German. But we bought that system, and John Griffin, he always into weather. John Griffin was the man at the old station at that time. And brought this thing in. We leased a landline from Oklahoma City to Kansas City. There's none of that satellite stuff, you know, like we do nowadays. And that data came in, and really I still have some of those images, satellite images, weather images there, and it's pretty close to as good as they are today. We could see the highway. I remember there was one clear day down near Lawton, and you could see it. It was just absolutely stunning. We named that thing Starcom 9, and these 5x7 glossies came out every few minutes, and we put that label on it every time, Starcom 9. We passed them out to all the kids. Yeah, somebody in town finally put a company in named after that. So let me do a quick look. There's Jack Lear. He rode a lot in those days. There's my first house. I was a fool and naive. They said, "Listen, Gary, we need to do some promotion." I said, "Well, what?" He said, "Well, we need to make it look like you're, you know, really a guy involved." And well, so the first promo they wanted to make was me in my shower, where I kind of open the door and peek out, and I don't remember what I said, but it was just awful. The next time they had me in the back of a boat in a swimsuit. Well, you know, that's probably more than any of us need to know, but they always had these ideas for promotion. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. There's the elephant I rode, the elephant hair. You guys, I'm just kind of fanning through that if this is okay with everybody out there. Lots of print advertising in those days. lots of radio advertising, of course, lots of television advertising. Because when I started, really, in effect, only 3 television stations, commercial stations around. So, it was a gold mine to have a television station at that time. I went out to Hobart and gave a talk. Then we had the Miss Hobart contest. The problem I had is I had never rented a tux before, so I went down and got measured, picked up my tux, drove out to Hobart, where my wife is from, and the tux was about, because I just wore a t-shirt and blue jeans out there. The tux was 3 times my size, but they put it on me and they pinned it up, and God, it was a nightmare. It was really a nightmare. It's kind of interesting. I'm looking at a Kiwanis club. I went to some of these clubs. I've been to some of them so darn many times they know my speech. I always tell them, "You sure you want me back there, because you're going to hear the same thing." I got to be made not official, but a honorary inmate at the prison down in southwest Oklahoma. Channel 9 used to have On the Road, Bill Beebe. It is in the 70s, a big motor home, and he'd go out and do stories. And I think his best story he ever did was on a watch rooster. Instead of having a watchdog, they just a watch rooster. And that sucker was mean. Chased he and the cameraman out of the right there. So see the truck there. They did a lot of things in that truck we probably don't want to talk about. There we are, and I see there's Tom Mahoney, and there's Bill Beebe in this picture out at Tinker Air Force Base, near those B-52s and such. Here's some names there's Ida B again. Frank Keating and I, and let's who else? Patience Ladding, she used to be mayor. Remember her? Let's see who else. Well, you won't know any of the other ones, but we went to the Miss Brick Throw, and that was I guess we judged in Stroud, Oklahoma. That was pretty exciting stuff. I've ridden in so many parades that, and I finally found out, they like the publicity you give them when you're on the television or radio, and you go ride in the parade, and the darndest one was I was in Seminole, and it's fairly long, 1.5 miles or so, and you just drive down there and they kick you out of the car and you walk back. I thought they just really want me because I'm really something. Well, I never did really think much that way. But TV, they used to have TV guides, the paper ones, lots of advertising in those, lots of exciting stuff, and you'd get to always see if your picture was in there. And it was interesting. I was probably least accepted in my hometown. I don't recall one person other than relatives come from my hometown to visit the station, and I'd invite them. And at some point, we had these suites at the various sport facilities. They would never come because they remember me as a kid that knocked 53 windows out of the Lincoln Elementary School in Enid, Oklahoma. So, right. But anyway, Sealing, Oklahoma is a great place. Let me check what else we got here. There's some guys I'm sorry I don't remember their names. But boy, I had a lot of hair in those days. I have really been blessed by an incredible career, and a lot of it, as I look back, it's being at the right place at the right time. If I'd come earlier back to Oklahoma and got a job, or later, a lot of these things probably never would have happened. But I just came at the right time. My personal philosophy is that life is made up out of decisions, and each decision takes you along the road of life. You don't know exactly where it's going to lead you, but you try to make more right ones than you do wrong ones, and we all make some wrong ones. Mine was right place, right time, and having just a burning desire to do what I was got to do. And all the people, on television that came before me, that kind of set the posture, set the model for it, and ended up making, Oklahoma City different than everyone else with respect to weather. But Harry Voigtman was the main one. And then all the great people I worked with through the years. And like I said, a lot of stories I know about them, I can't tell them. But I have them written, though. I'll get that out sometime. But it was all the great people, and a lot of people helped me through you can't make it without people. And Jerry Dalrymple, who went on to be executive vice president at News 9, starting out as a cable puller guy, he was a key person in my success. I'm not sure I would have succeeded without him. And he and I had a love-hate relationship. We had the best times, and other times we'd fight like cats and dogs because we disagreed on what we were going to do. But at least we disagreed, we were friends later. But so many great people and so many great leaders and so many people. I'm so sorry I don't remember their names, but you know, in television, what do we got? 200 employees out there, something like that. You know, they go through those pretty quickly, and they're scattered all around Oklahoma City. Saw Randy Cass was on doing a thing where he's singing. And he's a pretty good singer. You know, he was our chief operation or whatever he was, but he's went away, and there he's doing that. So, but anyway, I take a long time to say it. I've had a great career, and probably only a little bit of it is because of me. It's because of my wife, my family, the people I've been around, the people in Channel 9, people that helped guide me throughout my life. So, and the only other person I really mention is A.H. Glenn in New Orleans. He's the man that taught me discipline and taught me meteorology, oceanography, and civil engineering. Great time, great place. So thank you all very much.